Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt like you've been waiting too long for your breakthrough? Like you've been doing all the right things, praying, working hard, trusting God, but nothing seems to be happening? Let me tell you, don't give up. God will surprise you very soon. God's timing is something we often struggle to understand. As human beings, we live in a world dictated by clocks and calendars, by schedules and deadlines. We want things to happen quickly, especially when we're in need or desperate for change. But God operates on a different level. His timing is perfect because he sees the whole picture, the past, the present, and the future all at once. What may seem like a delay to us is actually God preparing everything to work out in a way that is far better than we could plan or imagine. When we don't see immediate results, it's easy to think that God has forgotten about us or that he's not listening. But God is always working behind the scenes, orchestrating the right circumstances and preparing us for the blessing that is to come. Sometimes he's not just working on the situation, he's working on us. There are moments when we are not ready for what we are asking for. If God were to give us what we desire too soon, it might not be a blessing, but a burden. That's why his timing is so essential. He knows when we are prepared to receive what he has in store. Take a look at nature. The seasons don't rush. A flower doesn't bloom before its time. Each stage, each moment has a purpose. If we try to force the process, we end up with something incomplete, something fragile. It's the same with our lives. God knows the exact moment when everything will come together perfectly. He knows when the right people will be in place, when the resources will be available, when our hearts will be strong enough to handle what's coming. It's all part of his divine plan. We've all been in situations where we felt impatient, wondering why things aren't happening according to our schedule. We've all asked, why is it taking so long? But what if the delay is actually saving us from something? What if the time of waiting is God protecting us, refining us, or preparing something even better? That's the beauty of his timing. Is never off, never too early, and never too late. It's always perfect. In those moments of waiting, we need to remind ourselves that just because we don't see it doesn't mean God isn't working. He is. And often when he moves, it's sudden. What may have seemed impossible for months, even years, can happen in an instant. And when it does, we'll look back and realize that God's timing was indeed perfect all along. Everything will make sense in hindsight. The delays, the frustrations, the periods of silence. It's all part of his grand design, and it's always for our ultimate good. We often like to think we know how God will work in our lives. We make plans, we set goals, and we have a picture in our mind of how things should unfold. But the truth is, God rarely moves in the way we expect. He often chooses to surprise us, bringing blessings and breakthroughs in ways we never saw coming. When we try to limit God to our own expectations, we confine the possibilities of what he can do. But when we open ourselves up to the unexpected, we allow God to work beyond what we think is possible. God's ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are far beyond ours. What we see as obstacles, God sees as opportunities. What we think is a dead end, he knows is just the beginning of something greater. Sometimes we're looking for answers in the wrong places. We may think the solution will come through a particular person, job, or opportunity, but God has a way of redirecting us to something far better. He surprises us by moving in situations we thought were closed, or by bringing people into our lives we never expected to meet. There are countless stories in Scripture where God surprises people. When Moses was standing at the Red Sea with the Egyptians closing in, no one expected the sea to part. When David faced Goliath, no one expected a shepherd boy to defeat a giant with a single stone. Time and time again, God moves in ways that defy human logic. And the same is true in our lives today. We may be facing a situation that seems impossible, but God has a solution that we haven't even considered yet. The key is to trust that God knows what he's doing, even when it doesn't make sense to us. Sometimes we miss out on the unexpected blessings because we're so focused on how we think things should happen. We pray for a specific outcome, and when it doesn't come the way we imagine, we feel disappointed. But what if the blessing is just around the corner in a form we didn't expect? God's surprises often come disguised as detours, delays, or even disappointments. But when we look back, we realize those moments were setting the stage for something far greater. In life, we have to learn to embrace the unexpected. God's surprises are not random, they are perfectly planned. They come at the right time, in the right way, and for the right reason. Sometimes what we think is a setback is actually a setup for something amazing. When we release our need to control the outcome and trust that God has something better in store, we open ourselves up to his surprises. And when those surprises come, they are always more fulfilling, more abundant, and more powerful than anything we could have imagined. Faith is a powerful force that opens the door to the unexpected blessings and surprises God has in store for us. When we trust God, even in the face of uncertainty, we activate his power in our lives. Faith is not just believing when everything is clear and easy. It's holding on to belief when circumstances seem impossible. It's that deep, unshakable conviction that God is working, even when there is no physical evidence. And it is through that faith that the miraculous begins to unfold. God often waits for us to take the first step in faith before he reveals the surprises he has planned. Faith acts as a trigger, setting things in motion in the spiritual realm. Think about it. When we believe, we align ourselves with God's promises. We step out of fear and doubt and move into a space where we are ready to receive. When we act in faith, we show God that we trust him completely, even without seeing the outcome. It's this trust that invites God to surprise us in ways beyond our understanding. Consider the times in Scripture where faith activated something unexpected. When Peter stepped out of the boat to walk on water, it wasn't until he took that first step that the water held him up. When the woman with the issue of blood reached out in faith to touch Jesus' garment, she was instantly healed. It was their faith that triggered the miracle, and their willingness to act without having all the answers that allowed the impossible to happen. Faith doesn't always come easily, especially when the circumstances around us seem discouraging. But it's precisely in those moments when things look bleakest that faith becomes most powerful. When we can say, I believe, even though I don't see it yet. We are telling God that we trust him to surprise us in his own time and in his own way. Faith is the evidence of things not seen, and when we hold on to that evidence, we give God room to move in our lives. What we must understand is that faith is not passive. It's not just sitting back and waiting for God to do something. Faith is active. It's stepping forward with confidence even when the path is unclear. It's making decisions based on what you believe, not what you see. And when you do this, you create space for God to work his surprises into your life. Faith puts us in a position to receive what God has already prepared. God loves to respond to faith. He loves to exceed our expectations and show us that he can do more than we can ask or imagine. But often he's waiting for us to take that leap, to step into the unknown and trust him fully. When we do, we activate the surprises that he's been preparing behind the scenes. Faith doesn't just invite God's blessings, it draws them into our lives in ways that often leave us speechless. In the end, it's not about how much we can do on our own. It's about how much we can trust God to do what only he can. Faith shifts the atmosphere. It moves mountains. It opens doors that we thought were permanently closed. And most importantly, it activates the unexpected, wonderful surprises that God has been waiting to release into our lives. When we live by faith, we live with the expectation that God will always do something immense. When things don't happen as quickly as we would like, it's easy to assume that God has said no to our prayers, dreams, or desires. But often what seems like a delay is not a denial. It's part of a bigger plan that we cannot yet see. God operates on his own schedule, and his timing is always perfect. What looks like a delay to us is often God working behind the scenes, preparing the right circumstances, the right people, and even the right version of ourselves to receive the blessing when the time is right. In those moments of waiting, we might feel frustrated or discouraged. We might wonder why things are taking so long, why the doors aren't opening, or why our efforts seem to go unnoticed. But what we don't realize is that the waiting period is often a time of growth. It's during this time that God is shaping us, building our character, and strengthening our faith. He is refining us so that when the answer comes, we are ready to handle it. If he gave us everything we asked for instantly, we might not be prepared for it, and it could overwhelm us or be wasted. Think of it like planting a seed. You don't expect the seed to sprout and bear fruit the next day. It takes time, water, sunlight, and patience. The same is true with the promises of God. Just because you don't see anything happening on the surface doesn't mean nothing is going on beneath it. Roots are growing, things are being nurtured, and soon in the right season, you will see the fruit of your faith. Sometimes God uses delay to teach us lessons we wouldn't learn any other way. We may learn patience, perseverance, and trust during these periods. Delay forces us to rely on God, not just for the end result, but for the daily strength to keep moving forward when the outcome is uncertain. It's in the waiting that our relationship with God deepens, because we realize that He is not just the giver of blessings, He is the blessing. He is with us in every step of the journey, not just at the destination. It's important to remember that delay is not a punishment. It's not a sign that God has forgotten you or that you are not worthy. In fact, sometimes delay is a sign that God has something bigger and better in store than you originally imagined. He may be delaying one door from opening because He has another better door that will open in due time. What may feel like a no in the moment could actually be a not yet. God's delays are often His way of protecting us from rushing into something that isn't right or from receiving something prematurely. The Bible is full of examples of people who experienced delay but were not denied. Joseph spent years in prison before he rose to power in Egypt. David waited years after being anointed as king before he actually sat on the throne. Even Abraham and Sarah waited decades for the promise of a child. In each of these cases, the delay wasn't a denial, it was a period of preparation. And when the time was right, God fulfilled His promises in ways that far exceeded what they could have expected. In our own lives, we need to trust that God knows what He's doing, even when it feels like nothing is happening. His silence doesn't mean He's forgotten about us. His delay doesn't mean He's ignoring our prayers. It means that He's working on something better than we could have planned. And when the answer finally comes, it will be clear that the waiting was worth it. The delay will make the blessing that much sweeter, because we will know that it came in God's perfect timing, not ours. So when you face delays, don't give up. Don't lose hope. Instead, see the delay as a divine setup for something greater. Trust that God is still working, even when you can't see it. Trust that His plans for you are good, and that the delay is simply part of the process. Stay faithful, keep praying, and remain expectant, knowing that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. Delay is not denial, it's preparation for something far beyond what you could imagine. Staying in position means holding on to where God has placed you, even when it seems like nothing is happening or when the challenges are overwhelming. It requires trusting that God has a plan, even when that plan isn't immediately clear. So often, when things aren't moving as fast as we would like, or when obstacles seem to block our path, the temptation is to step out of the position God has placed us in. We might think that we need to take control of the situation ourselves, or that if we move in a different direction, things will happen faster. But God calls us to stay where He has planted us until He says otherwise. There's something powerful about remaining steadfast even in the face of adversity. It demonstrates faith, patience, and a deep trust in God's timing. You may not see the results right away, but staying in position means believing that God is working behind the scenes, setting things in motion that you cannot yet see. It's like standing guard, knowing that even if nothing seems to be happening right in front of you, something greater is coming. Staying in position keeps you in alignment with God's will, positioning you to receive the breakthrough or blessing when the time is right. In those moments where you feel frustrated or tired, it can be tempting to think that you need to make a drastic change or move out of that position. But this is often where faith is tested. Staying in position is an act of obedience, even when you don't fully understand why. It's acknowledging that God knows more than you do and that He sees the full picture. While you may only see a portion of the situation, God is orchestrating things on a much larger scale. And if you step out of position too early, you may miss the opportunity or blessing that was meant for you. Staying in position also builds character. It teaches perseverance and strengthens your faith muscles. When you remain where God has placed you, despite the hardships or delays, you are being refined. It's like an athlete who trains consistently even when they don't see immediate results. Over time, the consistent effort leads to strength and endurance. The same is true in your spiritual life. By staying in position, you are being molded and shaped into who you need to be for the next phase of God's plan. This doesn't mean staying stagnant. Staying in position doesn't imply that you're doing nothing. It means being actively engaged in where God has you right now. It means being faithful in the small things, even when you feel like they don't matter. Sometimes it's those small, seemingly insignificant actions that prepare you for the larger task ahead. If you rush the process, you may not develop the skills, patience, or wisdom needed for the greater responsibility that is coming your way. Staying in position also means trusting that God knows the best path for you. You might have your own plans or ideas about how things should unfold, but God's plan is always better. It's easy to look at other people's lives and think that maybe you should be doing what they're doing. But God's plan for you is unique. And if you stay in the position He's placed you in, you'll see that His timing and direction will lead you to something far greater than you could have planned on your own. In the moments of doubt or difficulty, remind yourself that staying in position is a declaration of faith. It's saying, God, I trust you even when I don't understand. I believe you have something greater in store, and I will not move until you tell me. That kind of faith is powerful. It moves mountains. It activates God's promises in your life because you are showing Him that you trust His plan more than your own desires or fears. When the time is right, God will move you. He will open the doors that need to be opened and close the ones that are not meant for you. But until that time comes, staying in position keeps you in the perfect place to receive everything He has for you. It's about being rooted in faith, standing firm in the face of uncertainty, and trusting that God is working all things together for your good, even when you can't see it yet. God's rewards for faithfulness are both seen and unseen, immediate and eternal. Faithfulness means remaining committed, dedicated, and loyal to God, His purpose, and His principles, even when it's hard, even when no one else sees it, and even when there is no immediate reward. God sees every act of faithfulness, and He values it deeply because it reflects a heart that truly trusts and honors Him. When you remain faithful in your journey, God promises to reward that dedication in ways that go beyond what you can imagine. Being faithful means continuing to do the right thing, even when it's not easy or convenient. It's showing up, putting in the effort, and staying consistent, even when the results don't seem to be coming quickly. It's easy to be enthusiastic in the beginning of a journey, but real faithfulness shows itself over time in the consistency of your actions, words, and attitude. And God does not overlook this. He honors and rewards those who remain faithful to Him, especially in the small, everyday things that might seem insignificant. The reward for faithfulness isn't just about material blessings or external success. While God often blesses people in tangible ways, His rewards go much deeper. When you are faithful, God strengthens your character, builds your integrity, and deepens your relationship with Him. The internal growth that comes from faithfulness is often the most valuable reward, because it prepares you for even greater responsibilities and blessings in the future. The more faithful you are in the small things, the more God can trust you with greater things. Faithfulness also brings a sense of peace and fulfillment. When you know that you've stayed true to God's principles, regardless of the outcome or the opinions of others, there's a deep sense of satisfaction that comes from knowing you've done what's right. God's rewards are often felt in the joy and contentment that comes from living a life of integrity, knowing that you've honored Him with your actions. In times of difficulty, when the challenges seem overwhelming and it feels like nothing is changing, faithfulness is what keeps you grounded. It's easy to give up or compromise when the road gets tough, but those who stay the course and remain faithful will eventually see the reward of their perseverance. God often tests our faithfulness to see if we are truly committed to Him or just seeking the quick blessings. When we prove that we are faithful, even in the tough times, God's rewards are all the more abundant. Faithfulness is also tied to trust. When you remain faithful, you are showing God that you trust Him to handle the outcome. You're saying, God, I may not see the results right now, but I trust you enough to keep doing what you've called me to do. That trust is what activates God's blessings. He rewards those who continue to serve Him, even when it's not glamorous or easy. When you put your faith in God and stay committed to His plan, He always honors that with His faithfulness in return. God's rewards for faithfulness are not always immediate, but they are always certain. Sometimes the reward comes later than we expect, but it comes in God's perfect timing. He is never late. Whether it's a breakthrough in your personal life, the fulfillment of a dream, or a blessing you didn't even expect, God's reward for faithfulness always surpasses anything we could have imagined. He sees the bigger picture, and He knows when the best time is to release His blessings into your life. Faithfulness also paves the way for greater influence and impact. When God sees that He can trust you with small responsibilities, He opens doors for you to have a greater role in His plan. The story of the talents in the Bible reminds us that those who are faithful with little will be given much. As you prove your reliability, God enlarges your territory, giving you more opportunities to serve Him and others in greater ways. God's rewards are not just for this life, but for eternity. The faithfulness you show here on earth stores up treasures in heaven, where the ultimate reward awaits. Every act of obedience, every time you choose faith over fear, every moment you remain faithful when it's easier to quit, you are building an eternal legacy. God's rewards are everlasting, and they reflect His deep appreciation for the faithfulness you have shown to Him and His kingdom. Ultimately, God rewards faithfulness because it reflects His own nature. God Himself is faithful, always keeping His promises, always standing by His word. When we live a life of faithfulness, we are mirroring the character of God. And in doing so, we align ourselves with His heart, opening the way for His blessings to flow into our lives. When you remain faithful, you are not only securing blessings for today, but setting yourself up for a future filled with God's favor and reward. Preparing for overflow means getting ready for the abundance that God is about to pour into your life. It's about enlarging your capacity to receive more than what you've been used to. When you prepare for overflow, you're not just waiting for blessings to come, you're actively positioning yourself to handle them. God wants to bless us beyond our imagination, but we need to be ready to manage that blessing when it arrives. Preparation is key because blessings that come without readiness can be overwhelming or even lost. This preparation starts in your mind and heart. It requires shifting your mindset from scarcity to abundance, from thinking small to thinking big. Often we limit what we expect from God because we think only in terms of what we believe is possible. But God operates on a higher level than that. He is the God of overflow, meaning He doesn't just give us enough, He gives us more than enough. To prepare for that, we need to expand our belief in what He can do. We must stop thinking of God as limited by our circumstances or abilities and start embracing the limitless potential of His power. This kind of preparation also involves practical steps. It's about doing the work necessary to handle the overflow when it comes. If you're expecting financial overflow, for example, you need to learn how to manage money wisely before it arrives. If you're preparing for growth in your business or career, you need to develop the skills and systems that will sustain that growth. Overflow doesn't mean things will just happen automatically without effort on your part. It means God is giving you more opportunities, resources, and blessings than you can currently handle. So you need to grow into them. At the same time, preparing for overflow involves sowing seeds. The Bible teaches that you reap what you sow. So if you're expecting an abundant harvest, you need to be planting the right seeds now. Whether it's in your relationships, your finances, your work, or your spiritual life, the seeds you plant today will determine the overflow you experience tomorrow. God is ready to pour out blessings, but He's looking for those who are investing their time, energy, and faith into His purpose. You can't expect a harvest if you haven't planted anything. Another important aspect of preparing for overflow is making room for it. Sometimes, in order to receive the new, you have to let go of the old. This could mean releasing habits, mindsets, or even relationships that are holding you back from what God wants to do in your life. When God is preparing you for overflow, He may ask you to clean out areas of your life that are cluttered or that don't align with where He's taking you. It's about creating space, both physically and spiritually, for God to fill with His abundance. Faith is also a critical part of preparation. You need to believe that God's overflow is coming, even if you can't see it yet. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. When you act in faith, you're demonstrating that you trust God's promises. You're moving forward as though the overflow is already on its way, positioning yourself to receive it when it arrives. Faith says, I may not have the blessing yet, but I'm preparing for it as if it's already mine. That kind of faith pleases God and invites Him to move on your behalf. Moreover, preparing for overflow means being faithful with what you have now. It's easy to think that once the blessings come, everything will fall into place. But God is watching how you handle the little before He gives you more. If you're faithful in the small things, whether that's in your finances, your work, or your relationships, God will entrust you with greater things. The overflow is a reward for those who are diligent, consistent, and responsible with the resources they've already been given. When you're preparing for overflow, there's also an element of expectancy. It's about living in anticipation, knowing that God's blessings are on the way. Expectancy shifts the atmosphere around you. It changes the way you approach challenges and setbacks because you know that something greater is coming. You don't get discouraged by delays or difficulties because you're focused on the promise of overflow. Expectancy puts you in a position of faith, constantly looking for the ways God is going to move and bless you. As you prepare for overflow, you must also be ready to share it. God's blessings are never just for us alone. They are meant to overflow into the lives of others. The abundance that God brings into your life is designed to impact those around you. Whether that's through generosity, mentorship, or simply being a living example of His goodness. Preparing for overflow means having an open heart and open hands, ready to pass on the blessings that you receive. Finally, preparing for overflow is about aligning your will with God's will. The more you seek His purpose for your life, the more you position yourself to receive the fullness of His blessings. God's overflow is not just about material abundance, it's about spiritual richness, fulfillment, and walking in the destiny He has planned for you. When you align your desires with His, you open the door for the kind of blessings that not only meet your needs, but also bring glory to His name. When God blesses us abundantly, it becomes a powerful testimony to His glory. Every time we experience His favor, we become living proof of His goodness, mercy, and power. A testimony is more than just words. It's a visible demonstration of God's hand at work in our lives. When people see the changes in us, when they witness the blessings, breakthroughs, and transformations that happen as a result of God's intervention, it speaks volumes about His greatness. Our lives become a testament to what God can do, and in that, His glory shines through. God's glory is often revealed through the way He moves in the lives of His people. When we face challenges and God steps in, the outcome is not just for our benefit, but for the world to see His majesty and power. When we emerge from difficult situations stronger, wiser, and more blessed than before, it's clear to those around us that it wasn't our strength that carried us, it was the hand of God. The blessings we receive are not just for our own enjoyment, but they serve a greater purpose in reflecting the glory of God. Every testimony of victory, healing, provision, or breakthrough points directly to the God who made it possible. People may try to explain it away with natural causes or personal effort, but deep down they know that what they are witnessing goes beyond human ability. God often works in ways that defy logic, where the only reasonable explanation is divine intervention. That's how His glory is revealed, when the impossible becomes possible, and we can point back to Him as the source of it all. A testimony is a powerful tool of faith because it encourages others to believe that if God did it for you, He can do it for them. It serves as a reminder of His faithfulness and power. When you share how God showed up in your life, you're not just telling a story, you're planting seeds of faith in others. Your testimony becomes an invitation for others to trust God, to believe that He is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we can ask or think. As people hear your story, their own faith is stirred and God's glory is magnified through that process. Furthermore, the challenges we overcome and the blessings we receive are part of a larger narrative that brings God's name the honor it deserves. When God delivers us from difficult circumstances, He doesn't just do it to make us comfortable. He does it so that His name will be praised. The more we acknowledge that our blessings come from Him, the more His glory is spread. People who may not have believed in God before might reconsider their perspective when they see undeniable evidence of His work in your life. Sometimes our greatest testimonies come from our most difficult trials. It is in the darkest moments that God's light shines the brightest. When we find ourselves in situations that seem hopeless and hopeless, and God brings us out, the testimony that follows carries incredible weight. It's easy to talk about God's goodness when everything is going well. But when we can testify to His faithfulness in the midst of hardship, it has the power to move others in a profound way. Our struggles, paired with God's deliverance, become a stage on which His glory is displayed. God uses our testimonies to draw others to Himself. When people see the transformation in our lives, they become curious about the source of that change. Our testimony acts as a beacon, drawing others toward the God who can do for them what He has done for us. It's not about glorifying ourselves, but about making sure that God gets the credit He deserves. When we openly acknowledge that every good thing we have comes from Him, we are effectively making Him known to the world around us. The more we testify of God's goodness, the more He is glorified. He is a generous and loving Father who delights in blessing His children, but He also desires for those blessings to point back to Him. Our role is to be good stewards of the testimonies He gives us, sharing them freely so that others can see His hand at work. Every time we speak of His goodness, every time we tell someone about how He came through for us, we are giving Him the honor and glory that He is due. Our testimony is also a way of showing gratitude to God. When we share what He has done in our lives, we are expressing our thanks for His blessings. Gratitude magnifies God, and in turn, He continues to show up in our lives in bigger and more miraculous ways. As we openly express our appreciation for His works, we invite His presence to dwell even more richly with us. A grateful heart that continually testifies of God's goodness is one that attracts even more of His blessings. Ultimately, the purpose of every blessing, breakthrough, and victory is to reflect back to God. When we testify, we are simply being vessels of His glory. We are shining a light on His greatness, making His name known, and declaring to the world that our God is powerful, faithful, and worthy of all praise. Through our testimonies, God's glory is made visible on earth, and more people are drawn to experience His love and power for themselves. As we wrap up today's message, let us remember that God is always at work, orchestrating the events of our lives in ways that we may not fully understand. The surprises He has in store for us are not just mere coincidences, but divine interventions designed to uplift, empower, and bless us abundantly. We must remain steadfast in our faith, keeping our hearts open to the unexpected wonders that God is ready to unleash in our lives. Let us cultivate an attitude of expectancy, knowing that His timing is perfect and His plans are greater than anything we could envision for ourselves. The challenges we face, the waiting periods we endure, and the moments of uncertainty are all part of the journey toward those incredible surprises. Trust that every delay is simply preparation for something more magnificent. As you go forward, stay in position, ready and willing to receive what God has for you. Be faithful in your current circumstances. Prepare your heart for overflow, and share your testimony of His goodness with others. Embrace the surprises that are on their way and watch as God reveals His glory in your life. Remember, your miracle is closer than you think, and soon you will stand in awe of what He has done. Keep believing, keep hoping, and keep trusting, because God will surprise you very soon.